Hello, hello. Welcome to the Extraordinary Creatives podcast. I'm Ceri Hand. I'm a former gallerist, curator, now coach to creatives all over the world. I help them to make a bigger impact with their work and earn more money doing what they love. And I've been noticing something recently, both in my own life and in my coaching, and I wonder whether you'll recognize it too. We often think avoidance is obvious. We imagine it looks like procrastinating or scrolling social media or watching television instead of getting into the studio. But I honestly don't think that's how avoidance shows up for most creative people. I think it looks responsible. It looks like being busy. It looks like finally getting on top of your admin, saying yes to another teaching opportunity, maybe helping someone else out with their project, sorting your accounts out, applying for funding, reorganizing the studio. All good things and things that genuinely need doing. And that's why it's so difficult to spot. Because from the outside, it looks as though you're completely committed to your creative life. And from the inside, it feels as though you're working incredibly hard. Then you get to the end of the week and realize that you've hardly touched the work that matters most to you. I see this all the time. I was talking to a client recently who described herself as completely flat out. She couldn't understand why she wasn't making progress because, in her words, she'd never worked harder. So we looked at what she'd actually spent her week doing. She'd been teaching, doing admin, helping out other people, writing applications, replying to emails. She wasn't wasting time, quite the opposite. Then I asked her how much time she'd actually spent making her own work, and there was a long pause, and she said, hardly any. Now that conversation stayed with me because I don't think it's unusual. I think it's incredibly common. The interesting thing is that when we started to unpick it, teaching wasn't really the issue. She loved teaching. She was brilliant at it and it paid the bills. It gave her structure. It gave her feedback. It reminded her that she was good at something. The studio couldn't offer any of those things. The studio asked questions. The work was unresolved. She didn't know whether the ideas were any good yet. She didn't know whether she was wasting her time. She didn't know where it was going. Teaching gave her certainty. The studio gave her uncertainty. And without realizing it, she'd slowly started choosing certainty over uncertainty again and again. Not because she was lazy or because she lacked discipline, because she was human. And there's something really interesting happening here. And I think it's worth understanding because I know so many artists in particular beat themselves up about this. Behavioral psychology tells us when we do something which reduces discomfort, even briefly, our brain remembers it. It doesn't stop to ask whether that thing is helping us build the life we want. It just notices that we feel better. The anxiety drops, the tension eases, we get a little hit of relief. So the brain says, excellent, let's keep doing it again. And that's why avoidance can become such a powerful habit. It works, at least in the short term. The cost doesn't arrive until later. It arrives when the work feels thinner than you'd hoped, when months have gone by and you know you've been busy, but you can't quite point to what you've actually made. And that's why I don't really think avoidance is the enemy. I think it's information. It's telling us something. It's pointing us towards the places we don't yet feel able to stay. And for creative people, those places often exactly where the work starts to matter. It's the final edit, the difficult painting, the proposal you're frightened to send, the body of work that feels different from anything you've made before. It's the point where you have to commit before you know whether it's going to work. That's the bit we quietly step away from. So instead of asking yourself, why am I avoiding this? I wonder whether there's a better question. Maybe, what am I trying not to feel? Am I trying not to feel uncertain, not good enough, exposed, judged? Because that's a very different question. One usually leads to guilt, the other leads to understanding, and understanding gives you something to work with. What I don't think helps is piling more pressure on yourself. I've seen so many artists decide the answer is to become more disciplined, stricter, harder on themselves. And in my experience, that rarely works for long. If you're anything like me, you like to rebel against yourself on the regular. Creative work asks you to spend time somewhere that's unresolved, somewhere you don't know the answers yet. So if your nervous system experiences that as unsafe, shouting at yourself isn't going to make it feel safer. What often helps is making it easier to stay. Maybe that's a shorter session. Maybe it's agreeing that you'll only work for 20 minutes. Maybe it's asking someone to sit in the studio, either in real life or, as a couple of my clients did recently, online, while you both work. Maybe it's creating a clearer beginning and end to the session. Not because you're avoiding the work, but because you're building enough support to stay with it. I really think there's a difference. So I'd love you to notice something this week. The next time you suddenly feel an overwhelming urge to do something incredibly productive, instead of making the work, just pause for a moment. Don't judge yourself. Don't force yourself back into the studio. Just get curious. Ask yourself, what am I hoping I won't have to feel if I do this instead? Then see if you can stay with the work for just another 5 minutes. Not because 5 minutes will transform your practice overnight, but because every time you do that, you're teaching yourself something important. You're teaching yourself that uncertainty isn't something you always have to escape from. And I honestly think that's one of the most important creative skills we can build. Not making uncertainty disappear, but learning that we can stay with it long enough for the work to emerge. If you try this and notice a difference, would you let me know by sharing your comments in a review? If you're listening to this on your podcast player of choice, or you're watching this on YouTube, I read every single one of them. And not only does that help us to reach more creative folks and help them in more countries, but whilst you're there, tell me what topic you'd like me to cover in future. If you're happy for me to mention your name, let me know and I'll give you a shout out. Thanks for being here. Until next time. Thank you for spending this time with me. If something in this episode landed for you, please share it with one person who needs to hear it. Come and find me on Instagram at Ceri Hand, that's CeriHand, and join thousands of creatives reading my weekly newsletter at cerihand.com/subscribe for practical advice you can use this week straight to your inbox every Friday. Until then, keep making the work that only you can make.